as it happens, the same guy who's doing his best to currently tell everybody in this country that Māori are apparently coming to take more and more rights is the same guy who is trying to sell off New Zealanders' rights to access public health care. And that's just the start. Public ownership protects the dignity of everyone, especially those who can least afford it. Privatisation, Mr. Speaker, means that if you can't afford it, you don't get it. It literally means that people who cannot afford their medicine die. Once upon a time, not all too long ago, everything, the land that produces our food, the resources that go into what we eat and what we drink and what we use, well, they weren't divvied up and they didn't have fences around them and they weren't owned in such a way that those who couldn't afford it didn't get access to it. The very idea of the cost of living came from privatisation. When we privatise healthcare, when we privatise housing, education and energy, you end up paying more to access those things. And if you can't pay, you don't access those things. And in October of last year, I asked the Prime Minister about whether his government was intentionally starving public services of the investment that they need in order to sow the seeds of privatisation. Government members laughed at me. The Prime Minister accused me of conspiracy theories and the current and the incoming Deputy Prime Ministers joined in. Now he's telling us that he's going to take privatisation to the next election, which means that this government right now is currently managing our country's assets and well-being with a mind to selling those things off in the not-too-distant future. Just think about the former national government's decision to ignore an overwhelming public referendum not to sell public assets. And more than a decade ago, that national government sold off parts of our electricity sector against the wishes of the public. And today, we all pay the price of underinvested infrastructure and a manufactured electricity crisis powered by fossil fuel dependency every single winter in order for us to keep shareholder returns high. Now let's look at just what the Prime Minister is saying. Last week, he told everybody in his State of the Nation speech about his plans to, and I quote, roll out the red carpet for international investment in key infrastructure like transport and energy. This government has decided to cut public services to the bone to pay for landlord and tobacco tax cuts, and now it's becoming crystal clear that this government has no real interest whatsoever in investing in or building or growing our public services or infrastructure. Instead, they want it to be bought, built and owned by major foreign corporations, foreign governments, billionaires or hedge funds. And Mr. Speaker, that story does not end well for the little guy. The government is currently actively and openly asking the world's richest people to build and own the public services that all of us ultimately rely on because they are refusing to tax rich people fairly to maintain the services and the assets that we all rely on. Christopher Luxon's government doesn't want to govern. They want to farm out accountability. They want to sell it off.